Hello YouTube and welcome to yet another full stack web app tutorial. In this one we are now going to create the client add-on for posting and getting and removing our to-dos. So in the last episode we created that router to create our to-do list, post, get and remove to-dos from our users. So now we need to append that to the client so that we can access it from the front end, and then also add the unit tests so we can validate that those endpoints are doing what we intend them to do. So to do this, we will start with going into the client and then into endpoints, and it'll be very much similar to how we've been doing the user one. So we're going through the entire cycle again of creating the endpoints, then attaching them to the client, and then doing the tests. So it should be all familiar with you if you followed the earlier episodes. If we go to endpoints then and create todo.ts, what we want to do is then let's do some imports. So we want to import the post to do args. Those are the arguments for posting to do item, and then the actual to do type, what the structure of what a to do is. So it had the text, it had the created by ID and created date. We also want to import here the client, because we'll be attaching the client class to the endpoint class. We'll just import that from the index.jes. And now we want to actually create the endpoint class, so we're going to call this the to do endpoint. And we will have a protected value in here called client. So that's the client. We'll have the fetch function that we can use throughout our client, and we need to then construct. When we construct this, we're going to pass it the client object, and we're going to attach it to this object here, this client. Let's see. And now we can then start building out those functions just like we did in the user one. And I'll put this to the side so we can use it as a reference. Here we go. Oops, not to do. We'll do that split to the right. Here we go, close that one off. Okay, and so we've got here, remember we created a number of functions that did the fetch commands to access our router. So we're going to do the same here just for the to do. And we had 3 items. So the first one we would do is a post. So it's posting a new to do item. It's going to have this. It's going to be part of the to do object. So we pass it this as to do endpoint. And the params that it will need are the post to do args. We then do a constant URL equals. It's going to go onto the to do endpoint. So remember we added it to /API/to-do. The client will already add the API bit, and then we append the to do item to that URL. And we will return this.client._fetch. So I'll use that fetch command. It will return a string, the success, if we successfully posted an item. It is a post request. And we're giving it the parameters, the post to do arg parameters. So that is the function there, and we want to attach it then to our do endpoint. So we do so we're going to call it post on our endpoint. Of course, then we'll just map it to the post function. There we go. Got a couple of it's never read. Sorry, we need to pass that, of course, to the function here. There we go. So passing the URL to the fetch function. So that's post. Now we can add in, let's do the remove one maybe. So to do endpoint again. And this time this is going to take an ID of string and no other parameters, because it just needs the ID of the to do item to remove it from the database. Const URL equals /to do, and we're going to do return this client._fetch. Again, this will be a string. If it was successful, it's going to be of type delete, and then we don't actually have delete on our fetch function, so we just need to add that. So we remove that typing issue. We'll pass it the URL, and the URL needs the ID of that of the to-do item. So now if we just quickly pop into the index.tsd, what we need to do, we had methods for the different fetches. So we have get, post, put, and patch. What we also want to add there is delete. Again, normally in like maybe a more full-blown client, you'd never really delete an item. You'd probably put a patch request in there to say it's been archived, or you'd say delete, but actually on the back end, it just gets hidden from the user. So you always keep that data just in case they might want to reinitialize it or return it back into an active state. So we've got our remove, pass it that URL, and now we need to just attach it to public remove equals remove function. So now it's on our to-do endpoint. And the last one is then the get. So that's getting all the list of to-do items for our user. We do item. It does not need anything else. It's just it doesn't need any parameters or ID. We do a const URL equals to do, and then it's return list.client fetch, and this time we're going to say it's going to return a list of to-do items. So we can type that in there, and then we'll say it's a get request, and we'll pass it the URL. And those are all the elements, or just need to attach it to the class. And that is our client now having all the functions to be able to interface with our backend. Now we just need to attach it to our client, so we need to import it at the top here. Import to do endpoint, and then public, we're going to add a user item here to do endpoint, and we initialize it when we create a new client. So to do equals new to do endpoint, there it is, and then pass it this so it knows about the client, and we can do that connecting. So that's all the client additional functionality that we need. Now we can, as we've been using the client previously to do the tests for the user, we'll do the same thing for the to-dos. So if we go to the server, go into tests, new file, to-do router.test.ts, we can then start creating the tests for the to-do endpoints. So what we will need is the client, because we're going to use it to make the requests. We are going to also import assert from node assert, and we're going to import test, and then open up the brackets. We're going to also take the after, before, and describe. All of these functions are from we've used before in the user endpoint, and we'll do that from node test. So import those, and actually just as we did before, I will open up the user test just so we can see it as a comparison. You'll see that the structure of this is pretty much the same. So we're going to describe, so we'll copy, and we can copy a few bits over to speed up the dev. So we're going to describe here, we're going to go call this the to-do test. Let's close that off. It's going to need a client. We're going to client there. And we are also going to need, let's do this in a minute. We're going to create a function called tid, to do ID, and it's going to be type string or undefined. I'll set it to undefined for now. And then so before we do any of the tests, this is the function that gets fired before we do run any of the tests in this test unit, we are going to initialize the client just up here. So I'll copy that across. And we're also going to log in a user, so we might as well take this. So I can have to rewrite it. So we're going to log in the user. So client user.login. We're going to log in our admin, because we know the admin is always going to exist in the database because we create it if they do not exist. So at the moment, just for this sample here, we're just using the password admin, which we created in the reflect back here, all the way back into the index.ts when we initialize the users collection. So we create the admin. We want to just test that it did success, if it was successful. So status, if it doesn't equal 200, then we'll log an issue. Console log no user found or something like that, and we can then we'll exit this test because we can't run any of the tests without a user to be able to post requests. We could include a couple of tests where we don't have a user, just to check that the server does respond with errors saying that you don't actually have a user logged in. But for the tests that we are using in this just demo, we'll just put the ones of assuming that the user is logged in and is a valid user. So we'll just also do if content data or if content, then we can do client token equals the content.data. So the data that we get back from the client will be the JSON Web Token. So we'll append that to the client, and we can now start querying the server as we would be if we were a valid user on the web app. So first one we're going to do is then create a to-do item, because when we start the server for the testing, we won't have any data actually in the database. So we'll run an async test. We'll then just use so we'll get the status from client to do post. We're going to post the text requirement for the post a to do, and we expect that to all return strictly equal status 200. So it's just a quick one there. We're posting that to do, and we're getting, we need to await it. Wait for the client to return. Then we'll get the status, and if we'll just check if the status is 200. Next one, we will then, because we've posted that, we will then want to retrieve those posts. So we'll do the get to do. So that's it. We'll describe that test. So it's another asynchronous function, and we'll do another constant status. We'll get the status from the response object, and we will also grab the content, and we'll do it at await equals client to do get. And because the get one doesn't specify any parameters, it's just going to use the logged in user to find their to do items. We're going to first do the assert strict equal status. It should be 200, so it should have returned a success. And if it's returned success, then we should have the content. So we will access that content and get the ID. And we shall assert. This question mark is assuming that the ID is there, and it will return an undefined or something, an error if it's not there. So we will now then be able to say, let's do a check the type of TID, because it's either going to be undefined or a type of string. So if it was successful, we should have an object there, a string object, because it's returned the ID of that to-do item. So then we've successfully passed that, because now we've got the to-do item to now remove it. So we can now then do a test. Delete. That's to do. And as I've mentioned before, it's not ideal sometimes to have all the actual tests dependent on one another, but you imagine you could actually make these tests independent. You could have a whole one test that does the creation, deletion all together. It's just, again, for demo purposes, it's easier just to show you, them in separate tests. So one thing we're going to do here is just go say if there is a TID to do ID, then we will run this test. If not, we'll just run here assert dot strict equal through false, and we're asserting that just to highlight that will also fail. If the previous one has failed, this will also fail because the TID does not exist. Now we're going to query the router again, the server, and we're going to do await client dot fetch dot to do dot not fetch, sorry, dot to do dot get. Not remove, because we're removing, sorry. So yes, we're removing an item, so we want to do that, and we're going to pass it the TID, so we're going to remove that to do item from the database. And if all is well, we should have a strict equal status 200. Okay, and then after all is good, we can then just run an AC function just to exit this process. So we just do exit. And that's our test suite for the to-dos there. So we're posting one, we're going to retrieve the list and then take the first one from that list. Being that there's only one we've posted because it's a fresh database, it'll be the only item there, but then we get its ID and then we delete it from the list. So that should then all just become part of our test suite. So if we do now pm test server, it should now include those tests because it searches within that folder for any .test.ts files. And now we've got an added few tests, so we've now got 6. These are our user ones from before, and if we scroll up, here we go, we can start seeing, because we're logging the details, we can see that the to-do endpoint is being fired. We're getting some ticks to say, yep, it's posted a to-do item, it's got a to-do item, and later down it's removed a to-do item. So there we have and there we go, we've got all the to-do being called and running up and down our functions. So that's our to-dos items all done. So the test suite's there, the client's all connected up, and in the next episode we will be now creating that front end where you can add the user can actually interact with the website, add users for a user form, and then see the list of their to-do items, and then have each of those to-do items have a delete button so they can remove them from the list. And that will then be the final episode of the tutorial series. So yeah, thank you very much for watching, and check you out in the last episode. Bye bye.